Hello guys, today I'm making this video about the scientific article for Unit 5 for the exam of Pearson Edexcel International Advanced Level Biology exam. So as you may already know that for Unit 5 you're actually given a scientific article and you have to use that scientific article to answer question number 8. The scientific article is generally released a couple months earlier before the exam so that you can study and analyze the entire article and study accordingly to answer question number 8 that would be coming in on your exam. So, in case you are not clear about it, that in the exam itself, you would have another copy of the scientific article given to you, so you cannot carry your own scientific article in the exam hall, obviously, but you will be given a new one in the exam hall, so do not worry about that. So let's dive into the scientific article and let's see what you need to prepare for in order to properly answer this question. So we can see it's written Article 1. One species of whitefly, an aphid-like insect, has incorporated a portion of plant DNA into its genome that protects it from leaf toxins. It seems to be the first known example of so-called horizontal gene transfer between a plant and insect in which the transferred genetic material performs a useful function. So, right off the bat, something that comes into my mind that I think everyone who is attempting in the exam should study is um, is this. Um, so something you have to take note of is DNA into its genome. So they're talking about DNA and genome. So make sure you go through that concept, like what is genome and what is DNA, and you know everything regarding that. And another thing, the genome that protects it from leaf toxins. So there could be some questions that talk about how can this development, like having a DNA from this portion of the plant, helped the white fly being protected, or there could be a question of camouflage or something like that. So make sure you're prepared for questions like that. And they're also talking about gene transfer between a plant and insect. So they probably would modify their questions and ask you how can you transfer genes from one organism into another organism, and ask about probably transgenic organisms and the ways you could probably transfer genes. So be prepared to answer questions like that as well. In number 2, like the second paragraph, while sequencing the genome of the silver leaf whitefly, Ted Turlings at the University of Neuchâtel in Switzerland and his colleagues discovered a gene known as BTPMAT1, which is found in plants but never previously seen in insects. So they're talking about genome sequencing. So make sure you go through those things. This gene may have an important function in plants. The plants generate toxins to defend themselves from attack by animals. The team suspects that BTPMAT1 gene may help plants store these toxins in a harmless form so that plants don't poison themselves. Similarly, the gene may help the whitefly avoid being poisoned when it eats the plant. Alright, so right after reading this paragraph, some questions that I think you should prepare for is number one, how do the toxins the plant is generating helping them defend themselves against animals? So make sure you know what to think about it, like how the toxins could attack animals or and save the plants from being eaten. So you have to talk about cell destruction and all those things like poisoning and those kinds of points and prepare. And at the same time, you have to understand another point that I think is quite obvious here, which is how how the gene is helping the plant that they do not poison themselves. So they could ask questions about that as well, like how do the plants protect themselves against their own poison, and how the whitefly is actually using that same principle, like with the gene to stop being poisoned themselves. So these are the questions that I think could be asked in the exam. Now, Tarlings says the gene transfer event occurred between 35 million and 80 million years ago when the silverleaf whitefly and other whitefly species that lacked the gene split from a common ancestor. Okay, so another question that comes into my mind is actually referring to AS, some of the things you might have studied in your advanced subsidiary level that says about evolution, like how they came from a common ancestor and how they became two different species down the line, like silverleaf whitefly and the other whitefly species. So you could be asked something about sympatric speciation and like how they were isolated and how they developed into two different species. So be sure to remember those things. The gene transfer event may have involved viruses that cause diseases in plants and are transmitted via the whiteflies. Some DNA from a plant may have been taken up by a virus, transmitted to the whiteflies, and then subsequently assimilated into the insect's genome. So, another important part is that they're talking about viruses. So, when the question of viruses pops up, you must actually look into the chapter that talks about how viruses replicate and how they're going about and different things about viruses and how they would be transmitting these genes into the white fly. So you have to be learn you need to learn about those principles. Some viruses basically incorporate their own genome into the cells of their hosts, says Turlings. The research suggests that the extent to which horizontal gene transfer occurs in nature is probably underestimated, says Caitlin Bird at the Australian National University in Canberra. What this shows is that where there's a really strong pressure for survival on an organism, it can actually borrow genetic information that helps it do that from other organisms, says Bird. So, something that the article has over and over again is they're talking about horizontal gene transfer. So I think that by now you can understand that there could be some questions about horizontal gene transfer. So you have to know about gene transfer mechanisms and the ways genes can be transferred. And you would probably be asked about horizontal gene transfer mechanisms. So you have to move along according to what the question asks. All right. Um, then they said the researchers demonstrated the function of BTPMAT1 in whiteflies by selectively interfering with the gene using small molecules of RNA. Disrupting the gene's function made the whiteflies susceptible to compounds known as phenolic glycosides that are present in tomato plants. After feeding on tomato plants that had been genetically modified to produce RNA molecules, all whiteflies subsequently died. So they're talking about RNA right here. So, so they're talking about they interfered with the gene by using RNA. So be sure you know about RNA because they might be asking about how RNA works and all those things. So be sure to know about those things. Um, and yes, that could be a question here. This demonstrates a mechanism that we could use in engineering crops to basically target plant pests and target the resistance of crops to plant pests, says Bert. Although she points out that horizontal gene transfer may then allow the pests to evolve resistance to our genetic engineering. So obviously there is a very common question that pops up in exams is the question of resistance. So make sure you know how pests could uh, develop resistance against certain um, pesticides and those things. These are very common questions again. And that is what is coming up here. So make sure to learn about those topics.